The year was 1866. The colony of Queensland had separated from New South Wales, and the settlement of Moreton Bay was almost a quarter of a century old. Near the banks of the Brisbane River, in now what's known as the City Botanical Gardens, a group of men from the Brisbane Football Club came together to play the state's first organised football match, a game they called Victorian Rules. Soon after, Brisbane and Ipswich Grammar began intra-school competitions, followed by the formation of the Ipswich Football Club in 1870. News of this exciting brand of football spread throughout Queensland, with clubs emerging in Toowoomba and Warwick. In 1880, the Queensland Football Association was formed. Clubs sprang up in Gympie and Maryborough, and in 1884, Queensland played its first intercolonial matches against New South Wales. The game spread to North and Western Queensland, with clubs in Charters Towers. In 1885, there were over 40 Australian Rules clubs across Queensland, and all of the schools were also playing. In spite of tours by the Melbourne Football Club in 1888 and South Melbourne in 1890, the code began to decline. In 1888, after 22 seasons, the Brisbane Football Club played its last game, signalling what appeared to be the end of Australian rules in Queensland. But all was not lost, and at the turn of the century, a new peak body emerged. This passionate group held a successful return match between Brisbane and Ipswich, and 3 years later, in 1903, the Queensland Football League was formed. In 1905, games were first played at the Gabba. It was the start of a new era in Australian football. The legendary Windsor and Main clubs emerged in the 20s, followed by Kedron and Yeronga in the 30s, and Cooperoo, Wilston Grange and Western Districts in the 40s. The 50s saw the birth of Morningside, Sandgate and University, and the game ignite in Mount Isa, Townsville and Cairns. The 60s brought an explosion of junior clubs, paving the way for the suburban 70s group, including Aspley, Redland, Sherwood and Mount Gravatt. The Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Darling Downs, Bundaberg Wide Bay, Capricornia, Central Highlands and Mackay Leagues also flourished in the 70s. Queensland's victory over Tasmania at the Gabba in 1975 was heralded as the arrival of footy in the northern state. It was the beginning of a push for more interstate football and set the code on the path to participation in a national competition when it was launched a little over a decade later. Caloundra and Maroochydore dropped in and out of the State League during the 80s and 90s, and the entry of Southport in the early 1980s heralded an era of domination. Other Gold Coast clubs in Labrador and Broadbeach entered the State League in the 1990s, and of course the Brisbane Bears joined the VFL in 1987. But the merger of the Fitzroy Lions and the Brisbane Bears in 1997 was the beginning of the code's undoubted highlights, the Brisbane Lions' extraordinary triple premiership of 2001, 2002 and 2003. Today, Australian football is one of the most beloved sporting codes in Queensland, with the Brisbane Lions and the Gold Coast Suns formed in 2011 at the heart of the game's popularity. Over 215,000 Queenslanders regularly play Australian football. People of all ages, genders and cultural backgrounds, with a shared passion for the unique and spectacular nature of our game. In 2016, we mark 150 years since that first match was played in the Brisbane City Botanical Gardens. 150 years of victories, heartbreaking losses, footy legends and local heroes. We invite you to join with us as we celebrate this milestone and share the stories and achievements that make our game such an important part of Queensland's history.